Hey there, thanks for coming to my channel. My name is Alyssa Matesic and I'm an editor specializing in novels. I started my career in the publishing industry, working at Penguin Random House and a top-tier literary agency in New York City. These days, I edit everything from dark, twisted thrillers to fun and lighthearted rom-coms, so the full spectrum of fiction, really. My goal for this channel is to provide writers helpful tips for strengthening their stories and their prose, and also to offer advice for how to navigate the publishing journey. One element that I often discuss with my clients when we're working on a novel together is point of view. Most novels are written in either first person or third person. While there are some exceptions, second person isn't really a very common point of view for novels and can be really tricky to execute well. So today I'm going to focus on the pros and cons of novels written in first person specifically. First, let's lay out the basic definition of first person. First person writing uses I as the subject, meaning the novel will likely be written in the character's internal voice. A novel might have a single first person narrator for the entire duration of the novel, or it might have multiple first person narrators that the novel switches back and forth between. That approach is especially popular when it comes to thrillers. I've seen novels that have some chapters in first person and others in third person even. So how do you decide if first person is really the right point of view for your novel? Let's start by talking about the pros of first person. I'll start by admitting I love first person novels and I find myself drawn to them whenever I crack open a book to those first few pages. For starters, first person allows you to give the reader an intimate view into your character's mind. It allows you to bring your characters' voices to life, where they can express and confide their individual desires, concerns, and vulnerabilities. As a result, your readers will likely feel instantly connected to your narrator. They'll better understand your character's motivations and why they do what they do. Love it or hate it, the Twilight series is a good example to start with here. We see the events of the series by and large from Bella's sole point of view. And as such, we have a really deep understanding of all her emotions, her doubts, and her worries. Think about how different the series would be if we flipped back and forth to Edward's point of view. We'd see that he has entirely different thoughts and feelings and concerns from Bella. His perspective is so distinct that it deserves an entirely separate novel, which is in fact exactly what happened and was made reality with the latest book release. By keeping the focus on Bella, we're able to get a really strong sense and idea of who she is and what she cares about. It is super important for your reader to feel a strong connection to your protagonist because it will make them more invested in the story at large. So that's a big plus for first person. The second pro of first person is that it gives you as the writer the opportunity to develop a really compelling and creative voice for your character. So if your character has a big personality, first person narration is really where you can let that shine. For instance, if your character is really observant and they offer a lot of pointed insight on whatever they're witnessing, or your character might have a self-deprecating sense of humor that you bake into their voice. First person lets you imagine how that little voice inside your character's head sounds, and then make that voice a reality on the page. With first person, you also get another added benefit. It can be easier to get the reader immediately hooked and immersed in your novel. Because we're getting that glimpse into the character's mind, and you're able to craft the narration to capture their idiosyncratic voice, first person can provide a really compelling entry point to your novel. Put simply, if the reader is captivated with your point of view character's mind and voice, they're more likely to be captivated with your novel as a whole. The last pro for first person relates to any novel where you're trying to create a sense of urgency and intrigue. While this certainly applies to any novel that falls under the suspense umbrella, I'm not only talking about thrillers here. All novels should have some underlying element of suspense. That's what keeps the reader reading, because they want to uncover or unravel something. And first person can be used as a tactic to help you build that sense of suspense. Because this point of view is more narrow and you're only letting the reader see the thoughts of one particular character, or perhaps a handful of characters, you're able to keep the narrative under tight control. For example, perhaps your narrator doesn't yet know something that other characters do, like the culprit behind a crime. The reader then is kept in the dark along with your narrator. This puts your reader right there in sidestep with them every step of their investigation, and it keeps them on their toes as they're turning the pages. So, admittedly, there are a lot of appealing qualities about novels written in first person, but I want to stay balanced here. So let's take some time to talk about some cons about first person. The biggest con of first person is that by nature, you're only giving your reader limited insight into your overall plot. This can be a plus in certain scenarios, like if you're trying to establish suspense, like I just outlined. But it's really important to craft the first person narration in such a way that your reader doesn't feel like they're missing something. I'll give you a brief example. I was editing a client's novel the other day, and it was written in first person from one character's point of view. I realized as I was about halfway through the novel that the story would be so much richer if the writer added another character's point of view. That second point of view would add a deeper perspective and another important viewpoint to all the events that unfolded. This speaks to a situation in which one single first-person narrator left something to be desired. Another potential con is that first person can become tricky if your narrator is what we call an unreliable narrator. Now, there are novels that pull off the unreliable narrator really well, with the most well-known example being Gone Girl. But if your reader begins to doubt the trustworthiness of your first-person narrator, and you don't provide them another point of view that puts the plot into perspective, you run the risk of them becoming frustrated and losing interest in the story. The third con of first person is that you can alienate your reader if they don't enjoy the narrator's voice. As I mentioned before, one advantage of writing in first person is that it gives you the opportunity to be creative with crafting your narrator's unique voice and tone. But this advantage can quickly become a disadvantage if your reader finds your character's voice annoying. It's something that comes up a lot when publishing professionals are evaluating a manuscript, whether it's an agent considering representation or an editor considering a novel for publication. If they find a first-person voice irritating, or as an editor I used to work with said, grating, it's unlikely that they'll feel compelled to move forward with the novel, even if it's a well-plotted story otherwise. There are a few elements you can watch out for to ensure your first-person voice doesn't rub readers the wrong way. Some personal pet peeves of mine are if the narrator uses too many exclamations, or if a male narrator constantly makes internal comments about female characters' appearances. After reading a couple dozen pages, if these elements really start to get on my nerves, I'll find myself wanting to put the book down. But at the same time, I understand that the writer likely didn't intend for me to have such a strong aversion. This is why enlisting a beta reader or hiring a professional editor can be really helpful as you're working on your novel. Not only can they help you identify things like plot holes, but they can evaluate your narrator's tone and voice and let you know what their impression was. That way, you can ensure that your narrator is coming across exactly how you intended. To quickly summarize, let's go back over all the pros and cons I just laid out. The pros for first person are, it provides a close, intimate look into your character's mind. It allows you to develop a creative and original voice for your character. It helps you immediately hook your reader in your story. And it can help you establish suspense and a sense of urgency. The cons of first person are, the reader has limited insight into your overall plot. It can be difficult to keep the reader invested if you have an unreliable narrator, and you run the risk of your reader putting the novel down if they dislike the narrator's voice. Overall, using first-person point of view can be a really compelling and captivating approach for your novel. But take all of these pros and cons into consideration if you're writing a novel in first person. As I said, I find that I'm personally drawn to novels that are written in first person, but that is just a personal preference, and I have, of course, loved novels that are written in third person as well. I think the reason that I gravitate naturally more toward first-person novels is because I really value becoming invested in the characters I'm reading about and developing a close connection with them. But it definitely isn't the best approach for every novel. If you're ever doubting whether you chose the right point of view for your novel, my one piece of advice is to go with your gut. You naturally started writing the novel in a certain perspective for a reason, and I rarely advise my clients to completely overhaul their novels or write them from a different point of view. Again, your trusted beta readers or your editor will be happy to help you spot any issues with your narration so you can ensure it's really hooking the reader and holding their interest. I hope these pros and cons were helpful as you determine if first person is the right approach for your novel. If you have any questions at all about writing in first person, feel free to leave me a comment below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Also, feel free to check out my other videos. I have a lot of writing tips as well as advice on how to get published. And while you're there, make sure to subscribe so that you get updates on all my new videos. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing!